Good morning, dear students. Today we are going to discuss about the spleen. So spleen, this is the spleen here. It is a hemolymph organ and it belongs to reticuloendothelial system. So why are we calling it as hemolymph organ? Because the spleen filters the blood uh, and it takes out any worn out erythrocytes or any antigens present within the circulation. Whereas within the spleen, there are some lymphatic follicles and they will filter the lymph. Follicles are present, lymphatic follicles or lymphoid follicles are present, and they are going to filter the lymph. That's why we are calling it as hemolymph organ, and it belongs to reticuloendothelial system. In fetal life, spleen manufactures erythrocytes, and after birth, it manufactures lymphocytes. Situation. Now here in this image we can see this is where the spleen is present. So the spleen is situated in the upper left part of the abdomen between the diaphragm and the fundus of the stomach. So here if you see, this is the diaphragm here, the dome, left dome of the diaphragm, and this is the stomach. So in between them the spleen is situated, and it to describe exactly, it presents in the left hypochondrium. So if you divide the spleen into the lateral two-thirds and medial one-third, the medial one-third, this portion lies in the epigastrium, and lateral two-thirds, it lies in the left hypochondrium. Now coming to the axis of the spleen, this is the long axis of the spleen. So it is oblique, you can see in this image, and it is directed downwards, forwards and laterally, and it coincides with the left 10th rib. Here this line is where the left 10th rib is present. To make it clear, on the right side you can see this is the right 10th rib. Similarly, left 10th rib will be there. So the long axis of the spleen corresponds with the left 10th rib, and it makes around 45 degrees angle with the horizontal plane. If you take an imaginary horizontal plane here, so this axis will make around 45 degrees angle with the horizontal plane. So that is the axis of spleen coinciding with 10th rib, left 10th rib. Now coming to the shape of the spleen, usually it is flattened oblong in form, and when the colic impression. Now what is this colic impression? In this all these images, this surface what you are seeing is called as the visceral surface of the spleen, and on the visceral surface it is named visceral surface because it is related to the viscera. It is related to the stomach, it is related to the kidney here, it is related to the colon, and near the hilum it is related to the pancreas. So because it is related to all these viscera, all these organ, it is called as the visceral surface. And whenever the colic impression, which is usually present in this area, if it is prominent, then the shape of the spleen will be tetrahedral like this. And sometimes the colic impression may be absent, or it may not be that prominent. Then it resembles a segment of an orange like this, right? So, and other shapes that we'll see of the spleen are, this is the wedge shape, and then sometimes um, through a tongue-like projection is seen from the superior border. So this is one more shape wherein you can the shape of the spleen resembles a triangle. So it can be of wedge shape, triangle, or vertically oval, resembling a segment of orange, and or tetrahedral. These are the different shapes of the spleen. So when you see a specimen of the spleen, you should be able to identify different shapes of the spleen. Then coming to the measurements, the length of the spleen is around 12 centimeters. So the length is along this line. This is around 12 centimeters, and the breadth, or in inches if you want to describe, it is around 5 inches. The length is around 5 inches. The breadth is 7 centimeters or 3 inches, and the thickness is 3 centimeters or 1 inch, and the weight usually is 150 grams, and if you want to describe that in ounces, it will be 7 ounces, and the normal range of the weight will be around 80 to 300 grams. But average weight is around 150 grams or 7 ounces. Now here you have to understand the Harris dictum of odd numbers on the spleen. So what are these Harris dictum on odd numbers of the spleen? That is, if you see in inches we have described, right? So 1, 3, 5, 7, 9 and 11. This 1 here represents the thickness, 3 represents the breadth, 5 represents the length, 5 inches. Then 7 represents the 7 ounces of weight. Then what is this 9 and 11? So in this image, if we see, this is the 9th rib, 10th rib and 11th rib. So the spleen, the situation of the spleen on its diaphragmatic surface, it is related to 9, 10, 11 ribs. So only even number in relation to the spleen is this 10th rib. So that actually corresponds with the, what does it correspond to? It corresponds with the long axis of the spleen, right? So these odd numbers in relation to the spleen are called as the Harris dictum of odd numbers. And another thing is, in health, like in a healthy person, the size of the spleen diminishes in starvation and in old age or after severe exercise or in severe hemorrhage. In these conditions, even in a healthy person, the size of the spleen will be reduced. And in health, the size of the spleen will be increased in when during ingestion of the food, and also in well-fed persons, the size of the spleen will be large. But there are certain diseases wherein the enlargement of the spleen results. That conditions are, I mean, where the spleen is enlarged pathologically, then it is called as splenomegaly. Like in malaria, there will be enlargement of the spleen. So these are called as splenomegaly. Now coming to the characteristic features and presenting parts. Spleen is highly vascular. The characteristic feature of the spleen is it is highly vascular, it is friable, that means it is more soft and sensitive, and then elastic and purple in color. So these are the characteristic features of the spleen. And splenic parenchyma may regenerate. If some portion of the spleen is removed, it may regenerate. It has the capacity to regenerate. And what are the presenting parts? Presenting parts are two ends, two surfaces, two borders and two angles here. Now what are the two ends that we see? Medial and lateral. Now if you remember, in the position, we have seen that it is an obliquely oriented. So here this one will be the medial end or the posterior end. Because it is oblique, the medial end will be more posterior, and then here this is the anterior end, also called as lateral. So it is in this line, right? So this end will be lateral and this end will be medial, close to the midline of the body. Medial and lateral ends. Then there is a diaphragmatic surface. This surface which is related to the diaphragm is called as diaphragmatic surface, and this is called as the visceral surface. And there are two borders, superior border and inferior border, and two angles. One is anterobasal angle here and another one is posterobasal angle. So these are the parts of the presenting parts of the spleen. Now in this diaphragmatic surface, the diaphragmatic surface is smooth. This is the diaphragmatic surface. It is smooth, directed upwards, backwards, and to the left. And it is related to, one point is it is related to diaphragm here. This line represents the diaphragm. So that's why it is called as diaphragmatic surface. Then it is also related to, this is the lung here. Lower border of the left lung and the pleura which covers the lung. So it is also related to lung and left lung and pleura, and 9, 10, 11 ribs. So in the earlier image also I told you the diaphragmatic surface is related to 9, 10, 11 ribs. This is the diaphragmatic surface. Now coming to the visceral surface, this surface on which you will see the hilum of the spleen, it is called as visceral surface. So visceral surface, we are calling it as visceral because it is related to certain viscera, organs. So it is related to the stomach here, it is related to the kidney here, it is related to the colon, left colic flexure, and here near the hilum it is related to pancreas. In this image if you see, this is the tail of the pancreas. So here near to the hilum the pancreas is related. So altogether 4 impressions we are able to see because of the constant contact between the stomach, kidney, colon and pancreas with the spleen. It creates certain impressions on the visceral surface. So these are what we are seeing here: stomach, impression of the stomach or gastric impression we can say, then renal impression. This is renal impression, this is the impression left colic flexure, and here we'll see the pancreatic impression, right? So these are the things that we'll see on the visceral surface. So the gastric impression is formed by the fundus of the stomach. This is formed by the left kidney. This is formed by the left colic flexure and tail of pancreas. They are forming these impressions on the visceral surface. Then angles here, superior border. This is the superior border. This is the inferior border. This is anterobasal angle. This is posterobasal angle. And ends, what are the ends? Medial end or the posterior end, lateral end or the anterior end, right? And the superior border, how to identify the superior border? You will see the splenic notches. These lines what you are seeing, these are called as splenic notches, and these represent that during development the spleen is developed as different lobes and lobules. Okay, and after complete development it forms this single piece of mass, but those lobulated picture is represented by this we can understand that the spleen is developmentally lobulated by the presence of this splenic notches. Okay, so this is the superior border, this is the inferior border. And then anterobasal angle. What is this anterobasal angle? Anterobasal angle separates the superior border from the anterior end, or connects this superior border with this anterior end. So this is called as anterobasal angle. And this angle is also called as clinical angle of the spleen. This point you have to remember, that in diseases when the spleen is increased in its size, um, it will enlarge around 2 to 3 times of its original size. Then only you can palpate, or when you test or when you palpate the abdomen, you can feel the spleen only if it is enlarged 2 to 3 times. And the part that is felt during this palpation is the anterobasal angle. That's why it is also called as clinical angle of the spleen. Then this angle which separates the inferior border from the lateral end or the anterior end, this angle is called as posterobasal angle, right? So these are the borders and surfaces, anterior basal angle, posterior basal angle, and different ends of the spleen. Then there are ligaments in relation to the spleen. Four ligaments which are present are lieno-renal ligament. Lieno represents the spleen, renal represents the kidney. So between the spleen and here there is a renal impression, right? So between these two, kidney and the spleen, there will be lieno-renal present, lieno-renal ligament present here. And there will be one more ligament called as gastrosplenic ligament, which will be present between the stomach and the spleen. And the contents of the lieno-renal ligament are splenic vessels, tail of pancreas. This is the tail of pancreas. Then some lymph nodes you will see, fat will be there, and autonomic nerves will be there within the lieno-renal ligament. Gastrosplenic ligament will have short gastric vessels, left gastroepiploic vessels, autonomic nerves, some fat and lymph nodes are there. So if you just remember the location of these ligaments and what are the organs connected by that, that is sufficient. So gastro splenic and lieno-renal. Other ligaments are splenocholic ligament. So here if you see, this is the left cholic flexure where this transverse colon will continue as descending colon. This bend what you are seeing is called as the left cholic flexure. So connecting the left cholic flexure with the spleen, this is the splenocholic ligament. Then there will be pancreaticocholic ligament. These are all the supportive ligaments. So pancreas to the colon, and that is pancreaticocholic. Another one will be there between diaphragm. This is diaphragm here. So diaphragm to the colon. So this will be the phrenicocholic ligament. So these are the ligaments of the spleen. The arterial supply of the spleen, it is supplied only by the splenic artery. Here this is the splenic artery, but the splenic artery does not supply only the spleen. Splenic branches of the splenic artery are end arteries. These splenic branches are the end arteries, but the other branches of the same artery are not end arteries. The other branches are the pancreatic branches, short gastric, then left gastroepiploic. These are the other branches of the spleen which are not end arteries, but the splenic branches are the end arteries. The splenic artery is remarkably tortuous. If you see here, you can see the tortuosity of the splenic artery, and this may be to regulate the blood flow to the spleen in different metabolic activities of the life, and this tortuosity may allow movement of the spleen and permits distension of the stomach without obstruction to the splenic blood flow. Although the artery passes along the stomach bed, so this tortuosity helps to do all these activities. And on reaching the hilum of the spleen, the splenic artery divides into 5 or more segmental branches which enter the substance of the spleen along with the trabecular septa. And the segmental branches are end arteries, and their obstruction produces localized infarction of the spleen. All the segmental branches, there are any obstruction in these arteries that results in localized infarction of the spleen. Then each segmental artery divides into smaller and smaller branches which run through the trabecular septa in the interlobular spaces. Therefore, the arteries are invested with fibroelastic sheath and are interlobular in position. And numerous arterioles arising from the smaller arteries leave the trabecular septa and enter the splenic lobules. So that we will see in the next slide now. So in this image we can see this one is the arteriole. So each arteriole is invested by a lymphatic sheath. This blue thing here, this is the lymphatic sheath, each arteriole, and which consists of lymphocytes are there here with the germinal center. You can see this is the lymphatic nodule. So each central arteriole, it is invested by this periarteriolar lymphoid sheath. Here this is the sheath, and this passes to the lymphatic nodules. And in some places, the lymphocytes are aggregated to form small spherical, these ovoid masses. These are called as lymphatic nodules, as you all know. And these are called as white pulp. So this area is called as white pulp, and rest of the area in between this white pulp is called as the red pulp. And this is also called as Malpighian bodies. This white pulp is also called as Malpighian bodies, and each white pulp is traversed eccentrically by an arteriole. Thus, arterioles are intralobular in position and invested by lymphatic sheath, and arterioles divide repeatedly within the lymphatic sheath, and at the point where the sheath disappears, each arteriole subdivides into 3 to 5 straight vessels known as pencilii. These one. So this arteriole divides into 3 to 5 pencilii. These are called as pencillar arteries. Pencillar arterioles. These are one. So from the central arteriole, the pencillar arterioles are formed, branched off. Now each pencillar branch runs through the red pulp. So this is all rest of the area I told you, this is all the red pulp, and this is the white pulp. So each pencillar artery is running in the red pulp and is surrounded by a lamellated body, the ellipsoid. This one here. This is surrounded by a lamellated body called as ellipsoid, and which is formed by the aggregation of macrophages. This is formed by the aggregation of macrophages. Ellipsoids are well developed in cat and dog, but not in humans. The ellipsoids are so these ellipsoids are not prominent in the humans. They are more prominent in cats and dogs. So then coming to the splenic microcirculation. So here there are two schools of thought regarding the passage of blood between the arterioles and the splenic veins. One suggests a closed circulation from the arterioles and their terminal capillaries directly into the venous sinusoids. So here in this we are seeing this type is a closed circulation. So from the pencillar arterioles into the capillaries, then into the venules, and then into the veins. So this is a closed circulation. And the other school believes in open circulation, so that the blood is discharged first into a network of spaces in the splenic cords, so like this, okay, open circulation. So here, so blood is directly discharged into these spaces first, then that means into the spaces and into the splenic cords, and before entering into the sinusoid. So from here again the blood enters into the sinusoids through the minute slits in their walls. So through this it enters into the sinusoids, and then again the routine, it goes into the venules and in the veins. So this type of circulation is called as open circulation. So these are the two theories. One is the closed circulation, wherein from the pencillar arterioles into the capillaries, into the sinusoids, and then into the venules, into the capillary network, then into the venules and the veins. This is a closed type of circulation. In open circulation, this is the thing. From the arterioles, the blood first enters into the spaces between the splenic cords present in the red pulp, and from there the blood slowly later on enters into the sinusoids back. Then rest of the thing will be again into the venules and veins as the closed circulation. So first, if it enters into the spaces between the splenic cords in the red pulp, then it is called as open circulation. If the blood directly goes from the arterioles into the capillary network, then into the venules, this is called as closed circulation. So, two theories of circulation in the microcirculation of the spleen are described. So blood flows into spleen at the rate of about 150 ml per minute. Recently it is observed that after injecting isotopically labeled blood through the spleen, that the transit time um, possesses three components. One is the fast, then intermediate, and then slow. About 90% blood undergoes rapid transit within a few seconds and follows a closed circulation. About 8 to 9% takes minutes to pass through, and rest of it takes rest of 1 to 2% takes an hour or more. So therefore intermediate and slow transit follow the route of open circulation. Further, adhesive contacts in slow circulation takes place temporarily between the blood cells and the macrophages of the splenic cords. Such adhesive events permit sequestration of red cells, leukocytes and platelets for considerable periods before removal of damaged or aged cells by macrophages. Because of increased surface area of the splenic cords, that is cords of Billroth, the total volume of the blood in the intermediate and slow circulation greatly exceeds that of the fast transmit. Then coming to the venous drainage, the splenic vein is formed here at the hilum of the spleen, and it runs straight course behind the pancreas. That's why it is represented as a dotted line, and it joins the superior mesenteric vein here to form the portal vein. So splenic vein and superior mesenteric vein join together to form the portal vein, and its tributaries are short gastric will be there. These are the short gastric veins, then left gastroepiploic vein, and pancreatic vein, inferior mesenteric veins and pancreatic veins here. All these join together to form all these smaller veins, they drain into the splenic vein, and splenic vein finally joins with the superior mesenteric vein to form the portal vein, right? So this is the venous drainage. Then coming to the lymphatic drainage, the lymph vessels emerge from the hilum and pass through here. This is the hilum. So through the hilum, the efferent lymphatics will come out, and they drain into the pancreatico-splenic nodes. So here along the course of the splenic artery itself, you will see some pancreatico-splenic nodes, and then these nodes finally drain into the celiac nodes. So just remember these two nodes, pancreatico-splenic nodes and celiac nodes. So the lymph from the spleen is drained into these areas, these nodes. The nerve supply. The nerves accompany the splenic artery and are derived from celiac plexus. Now here the celiac artery is there. Surrounding the celiac artery there are celiac plexus and celiac ganglion. So those plexus, they run along the splenic artery, and they are going to supply the spleen. So remember the celiac plexus are going to supply the spleen, right? So this is in short about the spleen. Pancreas also I have discussed in other class. So right, thank you. So now the development of the spleen. Spleen is developed as a lobulated masses from the mesoderm of upper part of dorsal mesogastrium. So this is dorsal mesogastrium. So in this dorsal mesogastrium, under cover of its left layer, the spleen is developed as lobulated masses from the mesoderm present in this dorsal mesogastrium, and all the lobulated masses fuse to form a single organ the notches of the upper border of the spleen or the superior border of the spleen indicate the lobulated development of the organ. And when the stomach rotates, spleen is pushed towards the left side. Anterior part of the dorsal mesogastrium forms gastrosplenic ligament. This is gastrosplenic ligament, and posterior part persists as the this one is the gastrosplenic ligament here, and the posterior part persists as the linorenal ligament. Posterior part persists as the linorenal ligament. So that is the development of the pancreas. Then coming to the accessory spleen, so in this image we can see this area represents the presence of accessory spleen near to the hilum. So sometimes encapsulated splenic tissues are found in any of the following sites, and these are representing the accessory splenic tissue. So here what are they near to this hilum of the spleen here. So this is the same thing this image is showing here. And then along the splenic vessels, so along the splenic blood vessels also we can see the accessory tissue sometimes. Then splenocholic ligament here connecting the spleen to the cholic flexure, left cholic flexure here sometimes we can see. Then perirenal omentum here, here also another site. Then small bowel mesentery. In mesentery also occasionally you may see the accessory splenic tissue. Then in the presacral area, then uterine adnex sometimes, and in the peritesticular region also we may see the accessory splenic tissue. Rarely in the left spermatic cord also we can see the accessory spleens. Coming to the clinical aspect related to the spleen, one point to be noted is palpation of the spleen. A normal spleen is not palpable, but an enlarged spleen can be felt under the left costal margin. And when it increases to double of its original size, we can palpate the spleen. In normal spleen, few of the individuals, few of the populations, it may be palpable, but majority normal spleen is not palpable. What is splenomegaly? Enlargement of the spleen is called as splenomegaly, and sometimes the spleen becomes very large and it then projects towards the right iliac fossa in the direction of axis of the 10th rib. So that is splenomegaly. Then splenectomy. Surgical removal of the spleen is called as splenectomy, and during this operation damage to the tail of the pancreas has to be carefully avoided. Then splenic puncture. Spleen can be punctured through the 9th or 10th intercostal space in the mid-axillary line using a lumbar puncture needle. Intrasplenic pressure is an indirect record of portal pressure. So splenic venography reveals and confirms the enlarged portosystemic communication in cases of portal hypertension. Splenic infarction is the smaller branches of the splenic artery are the end arteries, and their obstruction results in the infarction. This is called as Kehr's sign. Spleen is a danger of trauma to the lower thoracic cage, especially 9, 10, 11 ribs, because it is related to those ribs. So any injury in that site, the spleen has a chance to get injured and leads to severe blood loss. Clinical anatomy, another few points. Pain of the splenic tissue is poorly localized. It is also referred to the epigastrium region. Stretch of the splenic capsule produces localized pain, posterior part of the left upper quadrant. Partial splenectomy is since there is segmental branches of the splenic artery, only one segment can be removed according to the state of the spleen. Whatever area affected, that segment can be removed and rest of it can be saved because of the segmental branches of the splenic artery. After splenectomy, spleen can be cut into small pieces and these can be implanted within the greater omentum uh, to maintain the functions performed by the spleen. Thank you.